The video you're about to review is the beginning process to starting a new order. Here we have our tonus. This is our daily planner. This is where you'll find the order number, the compound name, and how many batches we're going to run. To get the control plan, you take the 10-digit code from the order found in tonus. You go to the Weedra module, clicking on the Notes tab, entering the 10-digit code into the space provided. Once you've hit enter, it will give you a link to the work instruction. Once the control plan is pulled up, this is where you'll find all your information to your die, your screen sizes, your bar pressure limits, your packaging limits, and the lab testing procedures. The rheometer is where we do our online testing. Here is where you put in the rheometer information. Clicking on the Add Sample, you can add the batch number, the compound number, and the order number. Once the batch number and the compound and the order number have been entered in correctly, you can then add auto increment, which will give you the batch count. Once you place the batch count in your auto increment, in this case we're running 3 batches, you click Save. Once it's saved, the rheometer machine will be prompted to go to the correct time and temperature. The video we're about to review is the milling and extrusion process. At the start of each order, you want to be sure that your mill settings are entered in before the batch drops to the mill. So you want to go ahead and enter those in, acknowledge them. Once the mixer is finished mixing the first batch will drop to the mill. You want to turn the main drive on. Once you've got the main drive on, you want to reach under the mill and place the material to the front roller. Once you get the material banded to the front of the roller, you can proceed to turning the mill knife on. Once you've got the mill knife on, cut the strip and place it to the stock blender. Once you get the material to the stock blender, you can cut the right side and band it up and turn the mill knife off. Then you want to get the die out of the heated die cabinet. Be sure that the right number is matching on the control plan. Once you've got the die, place it to the gear pump. And you want to use the air gun and the 4 bolts to secure it to the die head. Then you want to turn on the gear pump. Once you've got the gear pump turned on, turn on the mill knife and place the strip to the gear pump. Once you've placed the strip to the gear pump, you want to speed up the gear pump to about 15 RPMs. And once the purging process is complete and the material is coming out of the front of the gear pump, you want to let it run out about 12 to 16 inches. Then you want to break the strip, turn the mill knife off, stop the gear pump, and cut off about 12 to 16 inches of the front of the material and discard it. Then you want to be sure to place the screens in with the small screen facing towards you. Once the screens are in the gear pump, close the door, close the clamp, and place the strip sensor onto the gear pump head. Once you've got everything in place, you want to turn the gear pump on, and we're going to ramp the speed up slowly. We're going to turn the mill knife on and proceed to starting the gear pump up. Once you get the material into the gear pump, then you can make adjustments as needed. This is a good time to set up your rollers and make any final adjustments to the batch off. Then you want to cut a sample from the mill, get the rheometer, place it into the mylar sheet, and place it into the rheometer. Once the material starts coming out of the gear pump, you want to cut about 2 foot off the front of it, discard it, and place the material to the inlet belt of the batch off. Once the material's on the batch off, make adjustments to the batch off speed so that you're not stretching the strip. This is very important. The video you're about to watch is going to be the pallet change procedure. To make a pallet change, you want to walk up the steps to the batch off and cover up the sensor, which is located in the right-hand corner closest to you of the batch off. The material will run back. Once it reaches about 3 or 4 arm lengths back, then you want to uncover the sensor and cut the material. Once you've got the material cut, then you want to press the pallet change button, which is located at the top of the control panel. Once the belt starts to move, you can place the material back to the belt and wait for the box to change. While the box changes, be sure to watch the monitor located to your right of the outlet belt and make sure that the box is moving down and the new box is moving over into place. Once the material is into the box, you want to uncover the sensor so that the material does not run back on its own and stretch the strip. It's very important to make sure that you uncover the sensor. Once the box is full, the box will move down during the pallet change and out toward the outlet belt on the conveyor. When the new box is in position, it will be lifted up into place and the next box can be started to fill. This video is going to be the starting of the pelletizing process. To start the pelletizing process, you want to turn on the pelletizing system. It'll take a few minutes for it to come on. While the pelletizing system is starting up, be sure that the screens are placed onto the pellet head and that you tighten it on and secure it. Be sure to place the pellet suction hose onto the pellet head and secure it tightly with the clamps. Once the hose is secure, you want to move the pellet head over into place and line with the extruder. Once the pellet head is moved into position with the extruder, then you must move the extruder up into place to the pellet head. When the extruder makes contact with the pellet head, then you want to close the bayonet. Once the bayonet is closed, turn on the main drive to the mill. Take the first batch and place it to the front roller of the mill. Once you've got the material onto the front roller, turn the mill knife on. Then you want to take the strip from the mill knife and place it to the stock blender. Cutting the right side and placing it up to the stock blender, then you can turn the mill knife off and cut the left side. Be sure that the gaps on the left side are smaller than the ones on the right and speed the gear pump up to the run speed. By this time, the pelletized system should be up and running. Turn on the talc blower. Once the talc blower has checked green and is on, then you can turn the pellet head knives on. Be sure that the pellet head knives are checked on before switching screens. Once the knives are on, you can turn the pellet head, start the extruder, and speed it up to 20 RPMs. Turning the mill knife on and starting the strip to the extruder. The video you're about to review is the screen change process for the pellet head. If the strip from the mill is broken and the bar pressure reaches the minimum, the alarm will sound. Once the alarm sounds, you will be prompted with a yellow screen asking you to acknowledge to perform the screen change. Once you've acknowledged it and closed it out, you can then turn the mill knife off and stop the extruder. Once the extruder is stopped, you need to open the bayonet and move the extruder back. Once the extruder is back out of place, you can then move the pellet head over. You need to move it over so that you have just enough room to get the screens off. Be sure that when you take the screens off the pellet head, that everything and all the material inside comes out with it. Also be sure that the material around the breaker plate is clean too. After everything is set, you can then move the pellet head back into place. After the pellet head is placed back into position, you will then proceed to moving the extruder back up to the pellet head and closing the bayonet. Once the bayonet is closed, the talc blower unit will turn on automatically, but you also need to switch to the pellet screen and be sure that it comes on. If it doesn't come on automatically, you can turn it on manually by pressing the on button on the talc blower unit. Once it is on, you can then turn the pellet knives system on. It's very important to be sure that both of these are turned on before switching back to the extruder screen. Once you've acknowledged both of these are on, you can then turn the extruder back on and start the strip from the mill. It is very important to make sure that once the strip is started back to the extruder, that you have the RPM set to a minimum of 20. The video you're about to review is safety. Safety is our #1 priority. There's approximately 11 e-stops on the mill. Here you can see that there is a cable placed at the top of the mill with reset buttons on each side. There's also a bar in front of the mill and on the back of the mill. There's also 4 e-stops placed on all 4 corners of the mill. And lastly, there is a e-stop placed on the control panel. For your safety, always be sure to know where all e-stops are located on the machine. Safety is our #1 goal. Before entering the production floor, you're required to wear the proper PPE, which consists of steel-toe boots, a bump cap, Kevlar sleeves, leather gloves, earplugs, and safety glasses. These must be worn at all times. It's important to remember that in order for the lift magnet to work properly, the breaker plate must be completely clear of all material left behind. If for any reason the hoist system is not working properly, notify your shift supervisor and do not attempt to move the breaker plate. This is the beginning process of using the hoist system when changing out the breaker plate. The first step when using the hoist system is important to be sure that the breaker plate is clean of any material. Lowering the lift magnet into position using the guide rod, placing it into the breaker plate, you can then engage the lift magnet lever into the on position. Be sure that it locks into the on position before lifting it up out of the rack. Once it is lifted up out of the rack, you can move it in position to be placed inside the gear pump. Remove the gear pump strip sensor and remove the gear pump die by removing the 4 bolts holding it into place on the front of the gear pump. Once the bolts are removed, release the gear pump clamp to allow you to open the gear pump door in position for removing the breaker plate. Once the breaker plate door is open, you may then place the breaker plate push-out rod onto the front of the gear pump door and align the hoist system with the front of the gear pump and the breaker plate. Once the hoist is aligned with the breaker plate, you may place it onto the front and engage the lever by locking it into the on position. Be sure that it is locked securely into the on position before using the breaker plate push-out tool. Once the breaker plate is out, you may move it out of the way and the new plate may be placed in position into the front of the gear pump. Once the plate is aligned and placed into the gear pump, you may release the clamp. Be sure that it's secured inside the gear pump head before releasing the clamp into the off position Now that the breaker plate is out of the gear pump, you can move it over into position to be placed into the holding rack. Using the hoist system, lower the breaker plate down into the rack. Be sure that it fits properly in the rack before disengaging the locking lever. It's important to remember that in order for the lift magnet to work properly, the breaker plate must be completely clear of all material left behind. If for any reason the hoist system is not working properly, notify your shift supervisor and do not attempt to move the breaker plate.